In the autumn of 1941, Nazi Germany's war machine stood at a critical, historic crossroads. The Panzers of Army Group Center had ground the western gates of Moscow to dust, but a far deadlier crisis loomed. That crisis was oil. The Wehrmacht's mechanized division was burning fuel at a mathematically unsustainable rate. Hitler, obsessed with resources, believed that capturing the Soviet Union's black gold was the true key to victory. Hitler famously remarked to his generals that if he did not capture the oil fields of Maikop and Grozny, he would be forced to end the war, revealing the raw economic focus of his strategic vision. Baku alone, situated on the western shores of the Caspian, was the undisputed crown jewel of Soviet heavy industry, producing over 24 million tons of high-grade crude oil every year to fuel the Red Army. In this grand strategic counterfactual, the Wehrmacht makes a radical resource-first choice. Instead of launching Operation Typhoon against Moscow, Hitler orders his elite panzer groups to turn south, creating an unstoppable pincer toward the Caucasus. But this bold southern thrust would immediately collide with the brutal realities of Soviet spatial geography. The distance from the starting lines to Baku was over 1,500 miles of underdeveloped hostile territory. The primary barrier was the railway network. The difference in rail gauge between standard European tracks and the wider Soviet tracks meant that every ton of fuel, ammunition, and food had to be painstakingly transloaded by hand. The Reichsbahn's repair crews worked under extreme conditions, but they lacked the locomotives and materials to convert the tracks fast enough. Individual panzer divisions were forced to operate at only a fraction of their authorized strength. Compounding this crisis was the Wehrmacht's heavy reliance on horsepower. Over 60% of German supply columns depended on horses, which required millions of tons of feed that had to compete with fuel on the overextended rails. Even if the German panzers successfully crossed the Don River, they would find a thoroughly prepared defender. Under the direct orders of the Soviet High Command, specialized NKVD units prepared a systematic scorched earth policy. Soviet demolition teams were trained to cement the wellheads, blow up the drilling rigs, and dismantle the refineries. They left nothing behind but smoking, concrete-filled industrial ruins that would yield no usable fuel for years. The German war economy lacked the specialized drilling rigs, massive steel pipelines, and marine tankers necessary to rebuild Baku's complex oil infrastructure from scratch under constant Soviet aerial bombardment. Furthermore, bypassing Moscow to drive deep into the south would introduce a catastrophic operational threat to the Wehrmacht's flanks. Leaving the Central Soviet Axis untouched would leave the Red Army's command hub intact. Moscow was the absolute center of the entire Soviet railway network. As long as the city remained in Soviet hands, Marshal Zhukov could rapidly redeploy complete armies from Siberia and the Far East to any threatened sector. The German drive to the Caucasus would create a narrow, highly vulnerable salient stretching over 1,500 miles. This exposed flank along the Volga River would be defended only by under-equipped satellite forces. The Red Army, operating from its secure central position, would detect this critical vulnerability. They would concentrate their massive strategic reserves to launch a series of crushing flanking blows, aiming to sever the German lines. A quantitative autopsy of this southern strategy reveals that it would have accelerated, rather than prevented, the ultimate collapse of the Axis war machine, exposing its severe mechanical limits. The Wehrmacht was consuming its motorized vehicles and spare parts at a rate that far exceeded domestic production, with over 30% of its panzers permanently sidelined due to mechanical wear and lack of parts. Additionally, the Soviet Black Sea Fleet maintained complete maritime superiority. They would land amphibious reinforcements along the Caucasus coast, systematically disrupting any German attempts to supply their advances. This maritime threat, combined with the lack of railways and the total paralysis of road transport, would have left the German spearhead in the Caucasus completely isolated, struggling to survive the winter. Instead of a grinding, multi-year war of attrition, the Wehrmacht's southern spearhead would have been rapidly cut off and destroyed in the winter of 1941, trapped in an encirclement far worse than Stalingrad. This early operational catastrophe would have shattered the Eastern Front several years ahead of schedule, leaving Nazi Germany completely defenseless against a resurgent Soviet Union and a reinforced Allied coalition. By proving that geography, logistics, and flank security always triumph over resource-driven, desperate dreams, the battle for the Caucasus would have sealed the fate of the Third Reich long before they could capture Baku. In the arena of total industrial war, the hard mathematical limits of logistics will always prevail, proving that Hitler's ultimate oil prize was nothing more than a beautiful, deadly, and unattainable strategic mirage.